Hello, it's me, Gleb Alexandrov for CreativeShrimp.com. In this video we'll have a look at how to compose multiple light layers rendered in Blender in DaVinci Resolve. This is a really exciting workflow. We've been using it a lot in our projects, in our Creative Shrimp teasers and whatnot, and it just helps to make prettier animations and experiment with different moods on the fly without re-rendering anything. Using multiple light layers means that you can literally design any kind of mood without re-rendering anything, simply by utilizing the DaVinci Resolve's mixing and color grading toolset. And if that is not exciting enough, the time savings can be colossal due to the reasons I will explain in this tutorial. Anyway, feel free to support our cause of delivering you great workflows by donating any amount between $0 and whatever, as this project is based on your donations. And also download the project files and all the videos on our Gumroad. Without further delay, we give you the disclaimer. Okay, that was anticlimactic. If you haven't used Resolve before for any kind of color management, it may feel a little bit like, I don't know, math or physics, something relatively hard to grasp. It may feel a little bit frustrating, in other words. In fact, it's absolutely normal to have a bit of a hard time with color management and all that stuff. So feel free to get back to this video at any time and use it as a reference. Okay, the premise of a multi-layer workflow is that you have a scene in Blender and the scene features multiple light sources, each one being a light layer essentially. Like here we have the sun, the light from the clouds, the ambient lighting, then some layers lights underwater and whatnot. In short, some light layers. What we need to do is render them separately, each one being its own image sequence. First, the EXR sequence of just this light or collection of lights, then again the same thing for that other light, and then for this one, and repeat for any amount of light layers that you want to see rendered. The upfront cost of doing it like that is of course having it rendered multiple times, unlike just pushing the button for the entire composition all at once and calling it a day. But it also offers some amazing benefits, which I'll show you in a moment. Like rendering stuff on a per layer basis usually goes pretty fast, as individual light layers require less render samples than the entire composition to clear up. We'll talk about that. Anyway, in the output settings, if we open this tab, we'd want to have these sequences exported out as OpenEXR rather than PNG, because this is the format meant for preserving the raw data across software. Half floating point precision is usually more than enough for the non-technical passes like light layers. 32-bit is mostly about storing height maps and that sort of technical stuff, so 16-bit precision is enough. And as for the compression or the codec, I usually go for DWAA, as it results in the smallest file size. And you know, XRs can be pretty heavy otherwise, so it really helps. DWAA has also a great quality to size ratio, despite this JPEG-like compression, so it's like a decent choice. Once exported out, these sequences, the EXR sequences, are then brought to Resolve. I ended up having 7 such layers. Okay, let's start by having a look at the project settings though. Namely, the project timeline resolution needs to be set to what we had in Blender, ideally. Then the desired playback rate as well, should be 24 FPS in this case. And then the color management. In this tutorial, we won't be managing colors from within this panel, you know, by going full color managed mode. Instead, we'll stick to the default settings in there and we'll use corrector nodes to do the color management part. The only thing I will change in this menu is the image scaling algorithm, which by default is set to sharper, which could lead to all kind of problems with scaling EXRs. So I'll switch it over to bicubic or bilinear. That is a minor detail, but it will save you a lot of trouble. Okay, that's pretty much it for the settings. Then it's a matter of dragging these XR layers onto the timeline and arranging it in a stack. They won't look fancy as is, The preview will look totally wrong, more about this later, but anyway, I will lay them out first, then sort color management. Okay, I'll enable snapping to make it easier to stack them. Okay, layer number 2 goes on top, layer number 3, and so on and so forth until every light layer has been put into place and stacked like that. Next, I'll open the Inspector tab at the right portion of the screen and I'll start changing the composite modes from normal to add, as light is supposed to be additive in nature. I'll do that for all the layers. As you can see, adding these layers together kind of starts to resemble what we had in the Blender's viewport, yet the preview obviously looks incorrect as it hasn't been color managed yet. I keep saying color managed. What does it mean, color managed? In order to explain that, let's open Blender for a moment and turn on all these lights, all these layers, I mean, so we see more or less final image. So when I say color managed, I mean simply that the raw render data is processed by whatever view transform or display rendering transform is selected within the color management tab in Blender. Let's have a look at it. AGX, for instance. As I say, the chemicals that help to develop our raw image, the view transform. By the way, speaking about raw, if we ditch AGX and change it to the raw view transform, over there we'll get a non-color managed result, just like what we have in DaVinci Resolve, in fact. And what we want to see instead is the result that resembles AGX or Filmic, or some other nice view transform, but in Resolve. I hope it makes sense. So far we've just laid all the layers out. Next we should do color management. This is the rare occasion when I don't have coffee nearby to take a sip. Just water to keep myself hydrated. By having multiple light layers available like that, what we can do now is essentially toggle them on and off by the right-click menu or by hitting D. That's the shortcut. We can really start adding and subtracting things to really change how our composition looks, apart from changing the opacity. That is a key thing about this workflow, actually, that we can relight our stuff in post rather than re-rendering the whole thing in Blender once we change something about lighting. Okay, the preview still looks broken, so we do need a display transform after all. The way we can add it for multiple layers is to open the Effects tab and look for the adjustment clip, sort of an adjustment layer. We just need to place it on top of everything else like that. Then we can just select it and open the Color tab where all the color adjustments happen, or most color adjustments happen in Resolve. Then if you open the clips, you will see that thumbnails of each light layer. What we need is the adjustment clip though, for now, to select it and make it active. This one. What I will do now is rename this node to linear to log, as it's the first color management operation that we'll do. Let's make some space. Yeah, so we're gonna do color management with the help of the CST, or Color Space Transform effect. The XR encoding is Rec 709 color space and linear gamma, and I'm going to convert it to DaVinci Wide Gamut color space, which is a nice wide color space, and DaVinci Intermediate gamma. The tone mapping can be switched off because we don't need it yet, and everything else left at its default value. If you're not sure what is color space and logarithmic and what does it all mean, we have a video about that which I recommend watching. For now, let's just say that we take the color space of our raw XRs and convert it into a working color space that DaVinci Resolve actually understands and knows how to apply the color grading tools and so on. That's what we do with this color operation in a nutshell. Having converted it to the working log color space, now we need to add one more corrector node from the right-click menu. it will be our log to display conversion. Something similar in function to AGX or Filmic, this type of view transform. I will use the color space transform again, but this time, let me check the outputs. Okay, this time we convert from the DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate inputs to Rec 709 color space and Gamma 2.2 or 2.4, depending on the type of display that we target. I will go with 2.4. Okay, this time I will leave the tone mapping on and this apply forward OOTF checkbox on as well. Again, don't let these technicalities demotivate you if these terms sound unfamiliar to you. Don't feel bad about simply copying the settings at this point. Basically, the way I set it all up is to make it look roughly like AGX, and that's it. And to make it properly accept color grading later on. As I've said, feel free to copy and paste these settings. And actually, we explore it in much more detail in the second video from this series, I believe. And basically, I recommend watching all the previous videos from this series, if you feel that the reason why we convert one color space to another sounds unclear. Okay, anyway, with these color space transforms, what we have just created is a basic setup for properly rendering EXRs in Resolve, and preparing them for color grading. Now, if we did everything right, something magical should have happened. Now we should be able to turn these light layers on and off and have it rendered properly in Resolve. I would even say rendered physically correctly in some way, as it will be no different, and think about it, no different from turning the light collections on and off in Blender. It will be just as, yeah, I would say physically correct, because light is additive in reality, so we kind of recreate how it fundamentally works in some way. But guess what? Unlike rendering it in Blender, now we can work with these light layers directly in Resolve, and in real time even, and can start tweaking things in real time. If you didn't know it can work like that in Resolve, and you feel you've already got some value out of this video, feel free to visit our Gumroad page with this series and leave us a tip. A coffee or 2, or 5, or 12 in the morning helps us to create videos like that. Now, to finish that setup that we've started to create, I'm gonna enter the color mode once again, or color tab, doesn't matter, making sure we're on the adjustment clip still, and I will add a couple more things. Namely, I'll add the exposure control, just another corrector node, before our linear to log conversion. This is a must-have in my opinion. To adjust the exposure, we can manipulate the very end of the RGB curve to push it straight up or down, or left and right, depending whether we want to decrease or increase it. Alternatively, in the color wheels section, you can use the gain for this exact same effect. Whatever floats your boat, really. Or there is the third method, doing the exact same thing. In the HDR grade menu, you can go for the global exposure control. This one. These controls will do pretty much the same operation, which incidentally should line up perfectly with how exposure works in Blender. Tried all three, I'll switch back to the regular color wheels though, as I feel more comfortable with them, and use the gain to adjust the exposure to where I like it. Mostly to just show how it works though. Without going into too much detail, we can use at least one more node in between the two color space conversions. That node, or a bunch of nodes at this place, will be our color grading. Again, the placement is not accidental. All the color grading should come after the linear to log conversion, because the Resolve's color grading tools will only work properly in a logarithmic color space. That's it. I think I'll close the effects for now. We no longer need it. Yeah, so these nodes are our basic setup for applying the view transform or display transform, and for color grading as well. The color grading pass is an interesting one, so let's zoom in a bit and talk about that. What you see here is the most minimal setup. We have just one node for color grading. And while it's technically possible to keep it like that, there's nothing wrong about it. While it's technically possible to do everything on one layer, so to speak, it's not always the best workflow. Well, if the shot doesn't call for an elaborate color grading, elaborate adjustments of any kind, then it's more than likely that you can get away with simply adjusting gamma and gain and lift and that kind of stuff for nailing the overall tonal solution, and maybe nudging the color balance in a certain way by adjusting the colorization of these wheels. And chances are it would even look good. It would still be better, at least in my opinion, to expand this setup a little bit. The color grading setup mostly. First of all, let me undo the node grade by right-clicking and selecting Reset Node Grade. What I usually do, and I think it is considered to be a good practice, is to add a bunch of corrected nodes for color correction instead of just one. To kind of split it up conceptually in a few steps, rather than doing everything in one go. We've already done it like that in one of the previous videos, in fact. So then each corrected node can do its own thing. For example, the first one can be the contrast. By contrast, I mean the contrast slider, but also an overall tonal balance from the color wheels adjustments. You know, just setting the basic tonality right, making it brighter or darker, changing the contrast, or crushing or lifting the shadows, in fact. That sort of stuff. Each corrected node dedicated to some easily understandable color grading operation. This one for the contrast. Actually, we can compare before and after by clicking on the bottom of the node like that. So that one for the contrast, then the second one can be, I don't know, overall tint or something. There are a lot of tutorials on YouTube exactly about this stuff. So the second one can be the tint, to nudge the overall temperature and tint of the image to colorize it in a certain way, or to get involved in a slightly more intricate colorization going in the color wheels. Here I'll just drag the color balance of the mid-tones towards blue, which is the gamma wheel, I mean. Okay, let's actually give it a nighttime look. I have this idea now. So maybe the third control can be our saturation then, to do sort of a bleach bypass. After all, if that is supposed to be a night shot, then saturation or color boost can be useful for taking some chroma away. Color boost, of course, having an interesting effect of leaving some highly saturated colors intact, like these blue lights underwater. Can it be a starship, or maybe a Godzilla taking a nap? Alright. Never mind, the saturation will have a slightly more uniform effect. We've also explored that in the second video from that series. Okay, so for example, we want to create a little bit of a bleach bypass indeed. And that would do the trick. Anyway, splitting it up into the bite-sized operations makes a lot of sense from the color grading standpoint. Then switching back to the exposure control to drop it significantly. If that's the night shot, it could make sense indeed. And that's how you roll. As a quick reminder, all these adjustments happen on the global adjustment clip, affecting all the layers beneath. What was I talking about? Yeah, the most important thing though is that we still have our light layers, which we can compose in a certain way. Like we can choose, do we need this layer, do we need that layer, or we can shut it down completely, or emphasize it furthermore. Like, do we need the underwater lights in this shot? That could be a good question, which can be answered since we have layers in place. We can turn it off at will. Obviously, that isn't something that we can do if we render everything in one go as just one beauty shot. Or maybe the environment light is something that can be switched off completely. As the only source of light is supposed to be the moon here, the inky shadows would look appropriate. Ultimately, it boils down to artistic preference though. The very fact that we have these layers is the most important thing. and the reason why bother rendering all the light layers one by one. Of course, switching it on and off isn't the only option. Sometimes if you need slightly more control, you can adjust the opacity, of each layer to really fine-tune that mixture. And then anytime you can jump back into the color tab, having the global adjustment layer selected, and keep tweaking the global look there. Maybe after all the shadows can use some gentle lift. You got the point. You can keep on tweaking the overall look. So we've got something like a nighttime moonlit lagoon in no time, presumably with the kaiju beneath the waves, or the eternity stone hidden there. Who knows? And we did that precisely by choosing what light layers to show and throwing a quick colorization on top. What I want to say, I think, is that with this workflow it is surprisingly fast to concoct any amount of looks. I just want you to know that I'm improvising here, by the way, for the most part. So if it goes south, well, it wasn't planned. So what if we ditch the desaturation pass and change our mind as for the color balance completely? Let's try it out. Let's make it really warm this time. You know, an exotic country movie filter type warm. It already looks like a different shot, right? And that's still working on the global adjustment layer without touching the individual opacities and that stuff. Just doing the sweeping changes on this layer. How about the contrast though? That's very subjective. I'm just trying to imagine what if this is a lake within a cave of some sort, and this is actually the last green ray of sunset getting through some cracks and lighting it up. Maybe the gain can be nudged in a bit more peachy direction, so to speak. So it isn't that unbearably yellow. This bloody citrus, bloody orange type of hue. I think it will look great. Not that you have to repeat these exact steps, I'm just trying to show the overall workflow. Then maybe I was wrong about desaturation pass removal. So I'll bring it back. Maybe the color boost desaturation would make it look slightly more interesting. I don't know, maybe it wasn't necessary. It's hard to tell. That's creative process after all. Now this looks like a totally different shot already. And keep in mind that we haven't touched the layers yet. Okay, to settle the final levels, I often get back to exposure to try to see if it looks any better, if more light has reached the sensor or less. And that's what exposure does in a nutshell. It may look better, who knows, if I adjust it. That's my thinking. And then it's time to shuffle the layers again. Reminder about the D shortcut that toggles it on and off. You know what, I'll just kill everything. So it's a blank canvas. Then let's see. There should probably be... No. Wrong. No ambient light for sure. But maybe just this key light that imitates the sun. And then this softer area light that creates this beautiful reflection. You tell me. I'm not sure. It looks pretty neat, but maybe I'll get rid of it, I think. To maintain this direct sun look. And that is pretty awesome. How about this volumetric beam layer? Yes, please. Then some extra layers which aren't as significant here, like some minor lights. Yeah, in my opinion, that is actually looking good. Do we still need the kaiju? Ditch it. That's the power of light layers. After sorting the composition out, you may feel the desire to get back to the global adjustments and still keep tweaking something. And who am I to tell you to hold it back? Obviously, a big part of the fun and usefulness of DaVinci Resolve comes from adjusting colors. That is what makes it such a valuable addition to our 3D rendering workflow. Precisely, its tools for shaping the look on the spot. So if you want to learn more about these tools and the whole process of color grading in DaVinci Resolve, I happily refer you to the second chapter of this series, the fundamentals of the Pro color grading workflow. It is quite a chunky video, about an hour and a half, so check it out if you have some time, and if you're curious to learn more about this aspect of DaVinci Resolve. And now, back to our multi-layer shenanigans. Here are a few examples of what we've been able to get utilizing this workflow, plus some basic grading in Resolve, and I think it's really powerful and it could be a useful tool in your armament. This multi-layered approach, I mean. This shot at the bottom though, I like how it turned out. That was a test I did off screen. A typical Hollywood sci-fi style, or perhaps a monster movie or something, gives away this sort of vibes. By the way, look at how the red lights are pulsating. And that is yet another benefit of having multiple layers. You can animate it. You can make it flicker, or make it change the brightness. Imagine the possibilities. It's really easy to tweak it too, as it's real time. This scene, or rather this composition, is put together in a similar way to the previous shot. It's the same layers, just arranged a bit differently, okay? Let me walk you through it really quickly. We have this layer with a reflection, sort of a base layer, really. This one with the extra lights for the waves, tinted bloody red. And then the main one with the underwater lights, also tinted red in a really bold way. As for color grading, the global adjustment layer doesn't hold anything particularly interesting. There's just one layer responsible for color balance, and I think that's it. There is some glow and grain as well, which we'll talk about in a moment. For now, I'll mute it down. The thing is, each light layer can also be color corrected separately, like any of these. For instance, the underwater lights. Okay, let's select it. I'll disable these by hitting Ctrl D or just left clicking on the bottom of the node. This is how it looked by default, without any adjustments. And then I basically corrected the hue a little bit. Let me reset it so I can redo it really quickly for you. So I believe that boiled down to rotating the hue until the lights hit the red spot. Rotating the hue, I mean adjusting the hue. And then the second node was kind of emphasizing this by doing a little bit of dragging the gain wheel towards red as well. You see, nothing special, very simple stuff indeed. And it was already enough to get something different going in terms of the overall mode and style. That was the original color, and that is the adjusted result. I think I also have adjusted the colors for the first layer with that soft reflection. I think what I did is created this slight hump in the RGB curves to brighten this layer a touch. This is just one corrector node still, by the way. So I think I brightened it up and also cooled down its gamma or mid-tones to achieve this bluish tint. I think it made it look pretty cool, no pun intended. So this color scheme reminds me of many Hollywood things, really. Mostly the sci-fi movies of a particular kind, you know. Then to pepper it up somewhat, I think I color balanced the composition, the global adjustment layer, I mean, by using temperature and tint. Basically just these two settings here. And that made the whole thing much warmer. It became less blue as a result, ironically, but that's what I ended up with anyway. Sometimes you don't need any complicated adjustments to make an effective change to the mood of the shot. And finally, to add that extra polish, I threw some glow on top of it. A nice little glare. Actually, let me recreate it really quickly. I'm gonna get rid of this one. Then quickly search for glow. Or maybe halation would do. Halation could be interesting too. It's a somewhat similar effect which causes the bright pixels to bloom. Well, maybe let's try searching for glow still. Here it is. Sometimes you don't know what you need until you do it. The shine threshold defines how much of a reach do you want the glow effect to have. I want it to affect the red lights mostly, I think. Then the spread is how diffuse the effect appears. I usually go for a pretty spread out look anyway. I think it just looks nice. The gamma and gain can be tweaked to taste. It is pretty easy to overdo this effect. So if it gets too obvious, opacity can be used to help keep it at bay. Yeah, I think that much glow, that much is probably okay. With me anyway. This is the glow. I also add some film grain quite often to sort of finalize the look and add that evasive cinematic quality to it. Usually just a tiny bit of that. You know, you cannot go wrong with a celluloid film grain, in my opinion. So this is how this shot was constructed, from the same building blocks as the previous compositions, just with a slightly different mix and slightly different colorization intent, I guess. The fun thing about having separate layers is being able to animate each one in a certain way. Let's take these lights as an example. We can make them flicker, or anything. What we can do is actually select these layers. Oh, we don't need to select it. We just need to jump into Fusion. I mean, this tab. And then we need to make sure we are in the right clip. So we can click clips to see the thumbnails at the bottom, then select the right one, which appears to be this one actually. Okay, I've already added the brightness flicker to it. Now I'm gonna delete it and do it from scratch. I'm going to bring up the Tools menu by right-clicking, and then go Add Tool, Color, Color, and eventually Brightness and Contrast. And plug it right in the nodes chain. In the Inspector tab on the right, we'll see the controls for this node. We'd need the gain, but first I'll clip the black. Otherwise it'll be generating negative values, and negative values are never good. So let's clip it. So what I want to do is wiggle the gain slider, which is the same as changing the exposure, by the way. I want to do it procedurally without setting any keyframes. The way we can do it is by right-clicking this icon and then modify with perturb. And then we should go to modifiers to see the perturb settings, and we need to tweak it in a certain way to make it flicker. I'll increase the strength to about 2 or 1.9 and give it a slightly higher amount of wobble and speed. The random seed is an important one to get right, even though you cannot really know how it would look before issuing a play blast. So a few attempts might be required to really nail it, the seed. Yeah, so it makes this layer undulate its brightness. And I think it is beautiful. I really do. That's a nice little trick to breathe in some life into your multi-layer compositions. If you like how it looks, you can actually make all the layers change their brightness in motion. That's how it would look if you applied a little bit of that effect to all the layers. Usually it looks gorgeous and adds very important dynamics to the shot. You know what, my friends, dear shrimps, if after watching this you'll actually create an animation with the lights changing their intensity, please share it with us on social media or our Discord. It would be really appreciated. Speaking about Discord, as a quick reminder, we actually have the Discord community available, so feel free to join in. We have created a dedicated channel for discussing Blender to Resolve workflow, color grading, color management, and all of that. The place where you can ask questions and help other people to wrap their heads around, this subject. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know that you're always welcome there. Alright folks, having the basic multi-layer workflow nailed between Blender and Resolve, now it's a good time to go slightly deeper and explore some advanced multi-layer techniques, such as saving a lot of time on render, basically churning out the super noisy light layers and then applying temporal denoise in Resolve. Or something like skipping every few frames in Blender, thus again saving a lot of time, then reconstructing these missing frames via optical flow in Resolve. In other words, the slightly more advanced techniques that work great with the multi-layer workflow. Here's a Blender scene that I'll split in light layers and render, while showing you a bunch of tricks. So we've got a bunch of light sources in this scene, such as the environment light, which is an HDRI environment providing the base ambience, that sort of thing. Then we've got some more lights, like the soft area light that I will switch on in just a second. And then some more, like this sun slash. And finally this creepy red light as well. The thing is, all these light layers have different levels of noise. Let me isolate the sun to show what I mean. The sunlight is going to be really noisy, as Cycles has to calculate all the secondary bounces and stuff. So for instance, this light is gonna produce an awful lot of noise. But because we render in layers, we can give it more samples to accommodate for these levels of noise. To make it clear up more efficiently, I guess. And then for some other layer, we can bring it down. Gosh, we can even save some time by rendering some layers in different resolution if you want to go this far in optimizing. But that is a little bit ridiculous. The frame step though, which is basically how many frames to skip when rendering, is super useful. Frame step of 2 means every second frame will be skipped, so running the simple math, it means rendering twice as fast. At the cost of footage looking choppy, but you know what, it's fixable in Resolve. More about it in a moment. I know that may sound a bit tedious and not worth it. I mean, tailoring the sample count and then frame step and even the resolution and potentially some other things for each separate layer. Like, isn't it a pain in the neck? And indeed, it is somewhat tedious comparing to just pushing the render button. That's true. But if you're gonna render light layers anyway, I mean the separate layers, you will be setting up multiple renders anyway. And you may use this opportunity to custom tailor some render settings for these layers, to get more samples for certain problematic layers, or to literally skip a bunch of frames in some other layers. For this composition, for example, only the dust particles layer was rendered without frame skip to get a proper motion blur, while I saved quite a bit of time on rendering everything else with the frame step of 2, meaning 2 times faster render. It is important to remember though that these sequences with the skipped frames need to be put in the alphanumeric order before importing it to Resolve. It cannot go like this, with the missing frames. I mean, that's a minor detail, but it should be put into alphanumerical order. In Windows, probably the easiest way to rename it is to select the last file, then shift-click the first one from this batch, and hit F2 for renaming, and give it some name. That should put it into alphanumeric order, so Resolve has no problems with importing this as a sequence. Then what we can do is lay it out like the previous time, having these sequences stacked in Resolve using the Add Blending mode. We can also tweak their opacity if needed. I also rendered this Stephen King's layer, Red Rum, apparently. I think sometimes it's just worth rendering a few extra layers just in case. Alright, as a quick reminder, we need an adjustment layer on top of that layer stack. It can be found in the Effects tab, just in case. We needed to set up a display transform in the Color tab for this adjustment clip, I mean. This time for a change, I won't be using the Color Space Transform effect, which is fine, but I want to try something else this time. I'll still create 2 empty corrector nodes right away. One for the linear to log conversion and another for log to display. Next, I'll simply open up the LUTs tab and we'll use one of the LUTs or lookup tables kindly baked from the Pixel Manager OSIO config by Joe Genko. You can find all of these display transform LUTs in the resource files on our Gumroad. Okay, first we need to hook this one up called LinearReg709 to Arilog C4. I'll drop it onto the first node. The image will become flattened out, meaning we're now in a logarithmic color space. And then we can use any of these display transform LUTs. Any of these. They're all good. I'll just use the AGX blender, which corresponds to, you guessed it, to AGX in Blender. No surprise to anyone. Actually, this might be the easiest way to get the AGX look in Resolve. That's how it can be set up really quickly, just by using 2 LUTs. And finally, I will also add the exposure control, like we've done multiple times before. That is just a good photographic practice to add this sort of control. I cannot get over how cool it is to be able to adjust exposure right in Resolve, of all things. This is such a good workflow. So that is the View Transform adjustment clip. If we play our video sequence now, our multi-layer composite I mean, at 24 FPS, this is how it will look. As we've rendered it in Blender with each second frame skipped, now the playback is too fast. If we play it at the intended frames per second, I mean. It has just half of the frames left, but plays at the original speed, thus making it play too fast. I hope it makes sense. And it's also noisy as hell, even though the color management is right. To make it play at a normal speed and kind of reconstruct the missing frames along the way, what we can do is change the clip speed first from the right-click menu. Tweaking the speed will automatically lead to frames per second changing. That's something to keep in mind. So I'll go ahead and change the speed to 50% of its original speed. We skipped half of the frames, so it should be 50% or 12 FPS. Now I'll just extend the clips one by one after adjusting their speed. 50 and extend. Then do it for this one and for everything. Then the adjustment layer should be extended as well to cover the whole thing again. If we play it back now, we'll obviously notice that the playback feels a little bit choppy. Obviously that's because it plays at just 12 FPS, half of the original FPS. We just slowed it down or stretched it without regenerating the missing frames, so to speak. This effect would be even more evident at the lower FPS, like 6 frames per second. The good news is that Resolve actually knows how to handle this kind of choppiness, even the free version of it. In Resolve, there is such thing as optical flow, which is basically an easy way to reconstruct the missing frames for a buttery smooth playback or a slow motion playback. To enable optical flow, select a clip, then go to Retime and Scaling panel on the right. If you click Retime Process, you'll see a bunch of options in there. The one that you need is called Optical Flow. That's the one that magically fills the blank spaces between the frames. I'll activate that for this layer and for every layer now, even for the ones that are hidden currently. Just by selecting these layers one by one and setting it manually. Chances are when you hit play it would still feel a little bit stuttery, but that will be fine upon rendering the movie, I mean exporting it out. It's just that Resolve cannot handle it in real time anymore. You know, we are doing it in a slightly non-optimal way, applying optical flow to each layer instead of pre-rendering it and then slowing the whole thing down. Anyway, here's the result at 6 FPS for clarity, without any optical flow, and in a moment I will show how it would look with the optical flow set to on. And here's, for comparison, the same clip, but with the optical flow applied. In my opinion, that's one of the most impressive features of the free version of Resolve, if you ask me. After fixing frames per second, the issue with the noise levels is still with us though. A disclaimer, noise reduction in DaVinci Resolve requires the studio version. Anyway, let me show you how to use it. The cool thing about this workflow is that we can apply denoising on a per layer basis. Like, for example, we can apply it to this layer only, to this extent that we need. Let's give it a try. Like, if we select some layer, let it be this one, and find the noise reduction effect among the effects, where it is, here. We just need to drag it onto the free corrected node. That's it. So we can actually apply it to this layer only, and only to the extent that is needed to clear up that layer. In the denoise settings there is a very cool section called temporal noise reduction. Temporal means it analyzes multiple frames for killing the noise, and usually it offers a less damaging effect than using a spatial denoise, or the one that is based on space, not time. Temporal denoising, depending on the footage, can be super effective. It's a shame we don't have something like that in Blender yet. As for the date of recording this video. Yeah, look at how this layer looks so much cleaner now, given that the render was just 32 samples or so. It's actually really impressive. Now we can browse through the rest of the layers and apply more denoising where needed, like for this softbox or area light layer. If I zoom in a bit, you'll see that the noise is strong with this one, indeed. Let's see what we'll get after applying some temporal denoise to it. Noise reduction. After applying some temporal denoise and driving the thresholds up, actually both luma and chroma, the result should look so much better, so much cleaner, much more pristine. I think it's straight up miraculous how denoise applied over time or temporal denoise preserves the detail in such a good way. There are cases though where temporal won't cut it alone, where there's just too much noise and fireflies, like in this light layer. What we can do then, when even increasing the temporal threshold all the way up to 100 won't kill the cycles grain completely, what we can do then is throw in a little bit of spatial denoising on top of that. At the bottom there's the spatial section. The most important parameter is the mode, with ultra noise reduction being the newest addition and arguably the most sophisticated denoising available in Resolve up to date. All we need to do is just click the Analyze button. You'll know that it worked, as the white rectangle will appear somewhere in the image, sampling the noise pattern from this section. Then the luma and chroma thresholds can be adjusted ever so slightly to make the effect stronger or weaker. That ultra noise reduction, especially when used together with the temporal denoise, in tandem, at least in my tests, has been working pretty good. In fact, I'm pretty impressed by it, unlike all other modes in the spatial tab, which are kind of garbage, and messing up with the image way too much. Alright, so that's the combined approach, where temporal and the spatial denoising are used together, where temporal alone isn't enough. You'll probably wonder though, what about the Blender's denoise, OptiX and Intel OpenImage? And fair enough, these denoising algorithms in Blender offer a really good intra-frame noise removal. Intra-frame meaning within a video frame with no regards for temporal consistency. In other words, it does remove noise very efficiently in static shots, but the result suffers from flickering issues in animations. If you render such sequence with the denoising baked in, as XRs, and then play it in Resolve, you'll notice that kind of chattering, which usually isn't looking good, to put it mildly. That's the flickering I'm talking about. What is interesting is that temporal denoise in Resolve can really help with this issue, by doing exactly what Blender cannot do for now, as in remove that chattering. And do that pretty efficiently, I must say. And if, after applying temporal denoise, it's still flickery, then this operation can be repeated again. As simple as that. We can just Ctrl-C to copy the noise reduction effect, and Ctrl-V to paste it onto this extra node. This of course comes at the cost of some extra smudging artifacts, but generally it works pretty well, and is a great synergy with the Blender's denoisers. Here's the result with the interlope image noise removal applied in Blender, and then with the temporal algorithm applied on top of it in Resolve. Hopefully you can see what I mean. We have used this technique a lot in our videos, the promo materials and such. Well, in the teaser of the cinematic lighting course, for sure. But that was pretty cool. Yeah, we used that technique a lot. You can still find it on creativeshrimp.com. Cinematic lighting. A little bit of an ad. An unfortunate consequence of using too much denoise, I mean for multiple layers, especially that ultra noise reduction one, is that it makes the viewport, or rather the preview, super slow. Super sluggish, in fact. So tweaking anything becomes a huge pain in the neck. That's pretty unfortunate, but that's the way things work. So we can either apply this effect last, before rendering, or select every layer, including the adjustment clip, like I'm gonna do now. Then right-click and create new compound clip first, as a first step to optimizing this. That won't solve the performance issues by itself, but it'll pack it neatly into just one compound clip. Which, by the way, if you want to change anything, could be opened in Timeline or decomposed back into clips. Open in Timeline works like this. It opens it as a separate composition, so you can make some changes to it, and after that click select Timeline at the top and go back to where you was before. Again, having it compacted into one clip like that won't solve the performance issues by itself. If you try to play it, you'll probably notice that it is just as slow to render as before. That being said, what we can do now is right-click and render in place, or I would call it pre-render in place. There are various format and codec options to choose there. I will just change the type to 1080p, or rather 1080i. Although it doesn't matter much, as it's just a placeholder. And I will click render and dump it into some random folder. After waiting for the pre-render to finish, it should play back smoothly once again. And it plays back smoothly once again. Let's see how far our original noisy and choppy footage has gone after all these tweaks. With the help of the Resolve's optical flow and noise reduction, I mean. The features that complement the multi-layer workflow in a big way. By the way, Resolve has plenty of such non-color gradient effects that are time savers, so if you like that kind of stuff, make sure to find and watch yet another video from that series. Top 5 non-color grading features of DaVinci Resolve. This is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it interesting. We've been using this workflow a lot in our Creative Shrimp projects of all kinds. Actually, I started playing with these ideas back in the day in I believe it was After Effects, and then we switched over to DaVinci Resolve and recreated the multi-layer workflow there. If you want to try it yourself, I mean, download the source footages and try mixing it and so on. You can download it all on our Gumroad. This is a free-to-pay project. It's completely donation-based, so you know what to do. Feel free to visit our Gumroad page to download the entire thing and possibly give us a donation, starting at $0 and then going up in increments until the shrimp's the limit. I thank you for watching. My name is Gleb Alexandrov, and you're watching the Blender to Resolve freemium series on creativeshrimp.com. Drink more coffee and we will change the world of computer graphics. Where is my coffee? Actually?